Labor Talks, recorded at Chippewa Valley Community Television in Eau Claire, Wisconsin.
Hello and welcome to Labor Talks. Today's special guest is Tom Quinn. Tom serves as the Executive Director for the Wisconsin Farmers Union. Welcome to Labor Talks, Tom.
Welcome to you, Lori.
We want to, go over some different things that are affecting today's farmers. And but first, we want to start with. Can you tell us a little bit about you?
Sure. So a little bit of background. I did not grow up on a farm, but I grew up in a small town in Minnesota, and all of my uncles who lived around, or 5 or 6 of them, were farmers. And one of them was the manager of the local co-op feed mill. So I worked on their farms every summer and got a full dose of being circulated from farm to farm. And then I went to the University of Minnesota, and when I got out, I worked for a while in community development, and in particular worked on a community development project that needed to build a supermarket in a low-income area, and we couldn't get. It's a sort of a hard place to buy food. We couldn't get a private company to come in, so I fell back on my experience with co-ops, and we started a cooperative grocery store, community-owned grocery store. And that was the first one of maybe 10 or so that ended up being started in the Twin Cities and have continued over the years. Anyway, that led me to move to want to get back to rural Wisconsin, to a rural area. And Wisconsin, this part of Wisconsin was extremely attractive and beautiful. So we moved here. My wife got a job at Stout, and I worked at a local feed mill. And ended up operating a small 30-cow dairy farm for about 15 years. And in all of that, got involved in agriculture. And so different roles, but for the past 5 years or so, I've been Executive Director of a Farmers Union. I've been a member for a long, long time, but that's been my role.
Well, and I grew up on a farm. It's a great place to raise kids. It's a great way to teach them what hard work is all about.
And that was why we moved back. We wanted our kids to live in a small town, and grow up in a small town.
And can you tell us a little bit more about the Wisconsin Farmers Union?
Sure. Wisconsin Farmers Union was actually started in 1936, and it was part of a series of state organizations that began at Texas and moved through the Great Plains and up into North Dakota, across into Wisconsin, and really in response to the economic stress of the Great Depression. And the Depression really first hit agriculture before it hit the rest of the country, which is often the case in these kind of things. So farmers formed an organization that could help them deal with, one, the political aspects of what was happening, and then two, some of the mutual assistance elements. So Farmers Union was founded in 1936. It's a general farm organization with really three sort of legs of its stool. One is have been true ever since it started. One is legislation, the importance of having public policy that supports family agriculture. Two, legislation, and again, the importance of public policy. And three, cooperation. So from the very beginning, those three aspects have been part of Farmers Union, and we've had a strong element of education about issues, advocating for policies at both the state and federal level, and then building cooperative institutions that provide mutual support for people's families and lives.
I know that when we were kids, my parents dumped milk.
Yeah.
Different things that the farmers used to do to try to raise awareness to the fact that the cost in the store might be here. That doesn't mean the farmers are getting that price.
Yeah. Well, and that has been part of the history of Farmers Union. We certainly, our members were active in direct actions like that in very similar ways to the labor union. Manifested differently, obviously, but oftentimes the only way to get your voice heard was to take some kind of public action, and so farmers participated in that. And really there's sort of an unknown history of what I would call agrarian protest, and often it has been affiliated with labor movement over the years. But it's a very rich history of farmers being willing to stand up for not just their own interests, but the larger social interest, and to take direct action when it was appropriate to do
Well, I know
that.
when we were all down in Madison with the rallies a couple of years back,
Yeah.
the tractor parade
Yeah.
reminded me of the tractor parades when I was a kid, and it was great to see everybody standing up for each other.
Yeah, I think that was a high point of recent history, where you got a chance to, that tractor rally and the unions that supported it and the crowds that were there. It was really a heartwarming thing to see.
The last couple of years, I think it's really come home that we are all in this together. We're all in the same state. We're all in it.
Yeah, I don't think it's ever been more true, really. And we have a lot to lose if we don't work together.
Work together.
Yeah.
You know, a recent op-ed piece, "Listen to the People," which was by David Wright Rosette, delved into the issue that our legislators are not listening to us. If they were here right now, what issues would you want to bring up?
Yeah, I think David's one of our policy organizers out of our Madison office, but he works around the state. And what he was getting at, I think, is that it just seems like there is a disconnect between the values that our legislators say they are representing and the values that we see every day in the coffee shops and church basements and feed mills around rural Wisconsin. And the biggest example of that has been this almost unbelievable willingness of the legislature to basically dismantle some of the basic protections for our elections and our democracy, really. So they've quite, without very much opportunity for debate or discussion, we've seen a willingness to open up elections to almost unlimited contributions, to expand the limits of contribution, and I think most sort of discouraging to allow for almost unlimited use of what is typically called dark money in elections. In other words, money that comes in from who knows where, from any source, and is used generally without any real attribution. And it's used primarily to attack candidates, and it has this sort of denigrating effect on democracy, and it discourages people from participating. It creates this kind of lack of feeling of powerlessness. And I think that's what David was getting at. If politicians really wanted to talk about issues, we talk about that. We talk about the efforts to very sort of deliberately undermine the ability of local governments to have control over some basic things about their communities, things that have always been part of our history in Wisconsin. We talk about some of the dangers to some of our resources like groundwater. We certainly would talk about, and we probably will later talk about, the rural schools. I mean, the bedrock of rural community, the thing that makes rural community come together in a lot of ways, is the ability to share the common value and participation in school districts. And this legislature, unfortunately, just doesn't see that as a value. And that feels like that's the disconnect I think he's talking about. And money is the thing that really that is the wedge that drives
The
that.
money buys everything, that
Yep.
they can buy their elections.
Yeah.
And it seems like it's, like you said, increasing the apathy of the common people
Yes.
to think that government doesn't do anything for them, so why should I go vote?
I think it's the worst thing you can do is to make people cynical about democracy and cynical about government. Government's by no means perfect, but we need to have a government that represents our interests, or we are not going to have a healthy and vibrant society, one worth living in.
I saw a quote the other day about how we aren't supposed to be afraid of our government. Government's supposed to be afraid of us because we vote them in and out. And I swear they feel that they're not anything to fear.
We're losing that. I will not give up. I don't think you will either, and I know the labor movement won't, but we need to get that back. and I feel it. You feel it in the countryside that there is sort of a recognition that it's lost. But I think, like you said, the problem is a sort of like feeling of helplessness and cynicism, and we have to overcome that somehow.
And they don't know who to listen to, because the media certainly doesn't get the proper word out.
Often that's true. Yeah.
What needs to be done to help our Wisconsin farm families when it comes to sustainable and renewable fuels?
Well, we have Farmers Union has a strong history in renewable fuels. We do think there is a role for some of the biofuels, ethanol, and the next generation of ethanol, which will come from cellulosic ethanol. It's not the total answer. We think it's part of the answer. If it's done right, it's part of the answer. But we have made a commitment to promote and develop solar energy in rural Wisconsin. We have a partnership with the Midwest Renewable Energy Association to develop a business model for how local communities, rural communities, could support and foster the development of dispersed solar energy in their communities. And Wisconsin's political environment is not very supportive of that, but that's going to change, we think. And the economics, the economics are there. The technology is there. We had a conference in Eau Claire last year before our convention, and we expected 50 people and had almost 200 people show up for it.
That's awesome.
And I think we're going to see some elements there. We're also partnering with a medium-scale commercial wind company to look at two options for wind farms in areas where that makes sense. Where the siting makes sense and it's not going to be disruptive to the community. So, climate change is real. The opportunity for renewable fuels to pump income into the rural economy is significant if it's done right, and if the mechanisms are there to make sure that the benefits flow locally, and not just to Wall Street. Essentially.
Well, and I know that as you drive across Wisconsin, you see more and more of the ethanol plants where farmers have bonded together to ship their own products there to make the ethanol.
And that's part of the solution.
Okay. And I saw that the Golden Triangle Awards were recently given to Senator Baldwin and to Congressman Mark Pocan.
Right.
Can you tell us more about what that award is?
Well, our national organization every year identifies several award winners, and it's sometimes 4 or 5, sometimes 6 or 7, but it's individuals in politics or in organizations who have demonstrated some kind of real commitment to family agriculture. And I think in the case of Senator Baldwin and Representative Pocan, it was because they were very strong friends of us on some key legislation. One in particular in this past year, when we were trying to work on something called country of origin labeling, where we'd require that imported meat, for example, from another country would be identified as where it came from, something which farmers supported and they strongly supported that, and I think the fast track vote on trade and a few other things. But they've been allies. When we go to Washington, they always take the time to meet with our delegation and to talk about what's important.
I know that, like I said, as I grew up on a dairy farm, Wisconsin used to be the dairy state.
Yes.
Now I had heard that this was the first year in like 4 years that we've now surpassed California again, but because of their droughts and because of their wildfires.
Yeah.
Taking that one step further, besides the country of origin, as a farmer's daughter, I would like to see Wisconsin on it. We used to have that made in Wisconsin.
Yeah.
My brother-in-law's family raises potatoes, and they said that the potatoes are coming in from Idaho and Canada. We're becoming the ginseng state and the cranberry state, and it's like I'd like to see the dairy state become us again.
No, I agree, and there's something about. I mean, you and I both were talking about what it was like, how many dairy farms we've lost, and the incredible economic benefit that dairy, mid-scale and medium to large scale, not maybe super big, but size dairy farms bring to an economy. All the service industries that happen around them, all the processing jobs that are there. We really need to regain that diversified agriculture that we tend to have lost over the last 10 or 15 years.
And we work with the guys on the trains.
Yeah.
And one of the guys told me, he says, yeah, he said, they're shipping California cheese here, putting it in a warehouse, storing it and then they'll come back and say, this is aged Wisconsin cheese. It's like, they don't get it. It's not the same thing.
No, it's not. And those are problems, that's for sure. Yeah.
Another op-ed piece that was that I saw was this time was by Zach Hernstadt, entitled "That Farmers Deserve Better." Went into about how 3 big companies are controlling the seeds, the fertilizers. How is this really affecting our family farms?
Yeah, I think it's been one of the more disturbing developments over the last 20 years is the concentration of, it's been going on for a long time, but it's gotten worse in the past few years. The concentration of supply in the hands of a few very large corporations, multinational corporations, and now they control the seed stock, and they control the chemicals and the fertilizers that are used for that seed stock, and the prices are just getting more. You wouldn't believe the increase in the cost of corn prices. I have farmers tell me that they're just done with it. They're gonna go away from the big companies because they're just not willing to pay those prices anymore. But the cost of inputs, and there are 2 things that drive farmers out of business primarily. And one of them is the cost of inputs, which has risen dramatically, and the other is the price of the commodities they get. And both the inputs and the commodity prices are really controlled by a very small number of businesses, and that's not a healthy situation.
No. And I've seen that the rise in the cost of the equipment.
Oh, yes.
I mean, I remember the tractors that we had on the farm and things like that. And nowadays, those tractors are so expensive, they can't afford to buy them.
Right. Right.
And so I've seen a trend where they're maybe renting them for the week of,
sure.
of where the combining has to be done, or
there's a lot more contracting. In order to get around that, people are doing more contracting for planting and services, and that's going to happen. But in the end, we also need to step back and say, look, is this the direction we want to go? Is this way of doing things where you have these supply chains that are so long, and you have these narrow number of corporations? Is that a resilient future, especially when we look at the potential impacts of climate change, which is going to happen, which is going to affect crops and production, or do we need to really rethink some of that?
And I've also seen, rather than the big corporate farms, you might have a father here and his 2 adult sons have 2 adjoining farms, and then they'll go together to share equipment
sure.
and to get the crops done.
Oh yeah, we see a lot of creative business arrangements being done by farmers, and we have a lot of family farms that have gotten quite big, and more power to them if they can make it work. What we are most concerned about is what we see as the outside investment coming in and buying farmland. We really do see that as a long-term threat to family.
Well, and it drives up the cost of the land, and and then they come in, and what are they going to do with the land? More and more land is sitting.
Yeah.
I've also seen how it bothers me when I drive by a beautiful 40 and there's a house sitting out in the middle of it. And I'm like, what did you do to that field?
Right.
And the farms that, as I said, you drive down where I grew up in Waupaca County, you drive down the road and all these barns are down. Yeah. Nobody's farming those farms anymore. They're working somewhere else, or their land is being rented out to a crop farmer. Not that crop farming isn't important, it is, but it's just not the same as that
It doesn't
small
bring
farm.
the same kind of benefit to the local economy as a more diversified agriculture does, that's for sure.
All occupations today are in need of an influx of young people going
sure.
into or becoming interested in committing themselves to the career in that field. What type of program has Wisconsin Farmers Union found beneficial for that purpose to encourage the youth?
Well, we have several. We do have a beginning farmers program that we work in cooperation with National Farmers Union, where we identify. This year, I think we identified 4 younger farmers from Wisconsin, and we put them into a 2-year program where they receive some training, and they work with farmers from 5 or 6 other states, so they get to see a variety of operations. So that's one way, just to kind of provide them with some support. We partner with an organization called the Dairy Grazing Apprenticeship Program, which is the only formal apprenticeship program certified by the Department of Labor, much like a labor union apprenticeship program, where a young person will sign on with a farmer, an established farmer, for a 2-year program and be trained on their farm while they work with them to learn the skills, which are very many, in dairy farming. And they come out, and then we help them, the program helps them identify an opportunity to purchase a farm. I think we need more of that. We also are looking at ways to support sort of niches in agriculture where it's a little easier to get started. So whether it's opportunities for farmers to grow products that are maybe get a higher price and sell them into a regional market. So we have started a cooperative, Wisconsin Food Hub, which is helping mid-sized vegetable growers, farms that are between 50 and 200 acres probably, sell crops directly to some of the larger supermarket chains in Wisconsin. And it's easier for a beginning farmer to get in at that scale than it is at
like a 70-head
dairy
farm.
Yeah. So those are just kind of Band-Aids, unfortunately. The government does have some good programs, but we need we need more.
And when you and I are going to be talking about rural schools in our next section here, but when I was in school, there was Wisconsin, the Future Farmers of America. But with the schools cutting all the extra programs, are we getting anywhere where we can help work with the schools to get these kids interested in farming?
Yeah, I think that's a possibility. It is. I mean, Future Farmers of America is still a very strong organization. They still do a lot of work, and they perform a really important function in the schools, no question about it. But as there are fewer and fewer farms, you have fewer and fewer kids who have that background. So they're starting to see, of course, participation from non-farm kids who want to get involved.
Well, and we were active in 4-H as well, which is another one, helping you with the animals.
It's a very unique organization in rural that engages young people and their parents in very important.
Okay. And I also recently saw an in-depth report, and we have it here, on how the governor's budget is affecting rural schools. Can you go over the high points of that a little bit, and the issue of how it will hurt our family farms?
Yeah, I think we've been partnering with an organization called the Wisconsin Rural Schools Alliance, which started in the past 5 years, mostly because school administrators and school board members, and I've been on a local school board, so I kind of understand the problem directly, were concerned that the state government was just totally ignoring the needs of these small schools. And if you lived in a small town, you know that really the vitality of that small community really rests on the school. I mean, it's often the largest employer, but it also creates this sort of sense of community and shared experience, and those schools are under stress. And the governor's budget cut, I can't remember the exact number, but several $100 million from rural schools, and that money was largely directed into the private school voucher program, so that you're taking dollars away from local school districts and putting it into private schools. Now, I don't know anybody in rural, there probably are some, but I don't know them, in rural Wisconsin who are demanding and calling for more charter schools. It's people are saying, we want to keep our public schools in place. And so you have schools that have declining enrollment, so they're losing state aids. You have fewer state aids coming in because of this transfer of students out of the district. In the end, it ends up creating a situation where it makes it harder and harder for the local tax base to support quality education. It's a major problem, and it has to be addressed.
Well, and a lot of people don't realize, if they didn't grow up in a rural area, you have an area that covers a radius of maybe 30 miles
Right.
for a rural school district. They've closed a lot of their littler schools and
Right.
bringing them into that central hub, that increases your transportation costs.
Transportation costs are one of the biggest costs for small districts, and there was some effort to adjust that in the budget, but not enough, and so that's putting increased pressure on schools. You go to school board meetings, and they're just continually talking about having to cut teachers, to cut programs. It is not the way to run a state, and it's not the right way to allocate resources.
And our kids are suffering it because of it. Tom, you have a conference coming up this week. Would you like to tell us a little bit about that conference?
Yeah, and this has a little bit to do with the question you had about beginning farmers. I mean, one of the areas of agriculture that has opportunities for entry at a fairly modest capital cost is something called community-supported agriculture, where farmers will identify a group of consumers who become members of their farm, essentially, and they agree to purchase a package of vegetables every week during the summer that's delivered to them. And that, though it turns out that done well, and often these are extremely well-run farms, it can be quite profitable, and the initial investment can be fairly modest. So we're having a conference in Eau Claire on Thursday and Friday, a Midwest conference for CS Community Support Agriculture Farms, and we expect probably 250 people to come. Workshops on what works, what doesn't work, new ideas, new strategies, a way to share ideas and network. And it's great because it will be a conference of people who are extremely excited about farming. And that's always great to be around farmers who are excited about sharing ideas and learning about each other's farms.
I know I was always brought up to believe that you find something that you like to do and you'll never work another day in your life. So you've got to have the people that have that passion.
That's how it feels. I mean, I think that this group of people does bring that to it, that's for sure.
Okay. Well, that's today's program. My thanks to our viewing audience and to Tom, who made today's program possible.
Thank you.
My thanks also to the folks working behind our cameras, who not only make this show possible, but give labor families and working families a voice that we are not getting in the other media options. A final note, Labor Talk is on channel 993 twice weekly, and you can also use your favorite search engines with keywords Labor Talks and CVC TV to find us online. We hope that you enjoyed our program and that you continue to come and listen and view us. Thank you.
Chippewa Valley Community Television is made possible by continuing community support. If you would like to volunteer or make a donation, you can contact us by calling 715-839-5067 or on the web at www.cvctv.org.